Yeah, US dollar, like you were talking about US dollar, Nick, and
Hmm.
that's exactly what we're going to talk about as well.
Okay.
Because, you know, like the dollar is, we know it's been crazy weak for a very, very long time. And it, like you explained, it depends on, if Trump gets his way with Fed Chair Powell and they, reduce interest rates, then we can only see the dollar, being weaker over the midterm. But really, from a technical standpoint, it's at some really good levels right now. So if
Mm.
we look at the weekly chart on pound US dollar, we've got a couple of alarms in there. Let me just remove those. Because we can see how, the weekly chart, we're going to start here and then we'll work our way down to the other time frames.
I'm
But
glad. I'm glad you're looking at the pound because I have a short position. So if you're bullish, go easy on me.
this may not be good listening, Nick.
That's
But
okay.
it depends. But it depends on, we still need sort of structure breaks and confirmation to take a buy, right? But just look how weak the US dollar's been, right? You could look at pound US dollar, you could look at euro US dollar. They all look like this, right? The
Mm.
weekly charts have been storming. US dollar's been super weak. And what we're seeing now is pound US dollar at a very nice support level, right? It's touched it once, twice, and it's at this level again. Now, the weekly is at a buying level. It doesn't mean I want to buy the market, right? I'm going to look at other time frames and get an idea of what I want to do from there. But we have literally yesterday had this very nice bullish candle form from this bearish area. From this support area.
Yep.
Right. So buyers for me have taken control of this market. And I think they can take the market to potentially 1.355 or even up to 1.36. I generally aim for psychological levels. So because of this bullish reaction, and because of the fact we broke H4 structure as well, as you can see here, price was coming down. We just ranged like it normally does when we find a support level, right? The market doesn't know what to do with itself.
Mm.
And we've had this, consolidation, if you like, on the H4, and now we've had a break out of that level. I think there's some room to the upside with pound US dollar. And it's a similar picture with euro US dollar.
Yep.
So if we take a look at that as well, so if we go to euro US dollar, exactly the same, right? We know the US dollar's been weak, and the weekly chart, has just, and that's also combined with euro's been very strong, right, for a long time as well. And then we're at a great weekly level, right? You can see this was once resistance, is now support. Will it want to make its way back up to these highs, right? Now, if we drop down to the day chart, okay, you can also see at this level of once resistance support, we've had a very bullish reaction at that level as well. This is less clean cut for me than the pound, because there is this wick here, right, that I would like to see broken. And then if it's going to do that, then then we can make our way back up to here.
Sure.
But we need to drop down to the H4. And you can also see here, right, we've had a H4 structure break again. We found our way back down to this support. The market gets a little uncertain when we find a big support level, but buyers have pushed this higher. You can see an alarm in here. I won't necessarily start buying from here, but this whole area I'm interested in. When the moving average 20 comes round, I think this could be a good technical trade to take price higher. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing with the US dollar.
Yeah, so the dollar itself, to your point, has just been in a monster downtrend this year.
Yes.
It's been kind of a crazy one to watch here, in terms of specifically, we had this huge push up towards the end of last year, and then completely reversed this with all the tariff uncertainty and with cooling inflation. We've seen a real big longer term kind of thrust lower on the dollar index. The question I guess I have too is, what, in terms of a technical basis, would you be looking for to show us that the dollar index may actually be reversing higher, right? So in this situation, right? So obviously, I love the chart markup. You've got pound dollar, right, which nailed that support level. I actually thought we were going to break through it. In fact, I looked at this thing and I said, okay, looks like we might be trying to break underneath, and nope, it shot back higher. So bulls are definitely still in control of this market. You've got a nice overall, hitting support, holding it here. I use a bit of a dollar cost averaging approach when it comes to FX, Tom. So I have a small short position here with willingness to potentially add another one here. I think that my timing in terms of FX is less important to me than more so just general longer term direction. I think that the pound could actually make a push higher and beyond, in which case I could build some longer term short opportunities against the dollar. So I'm not really super short term or timing focused, but in terms of this support level, right? Clearly buyers stepping in, looks like it could be making a push back up here. But what would you be looking for? Because I know a lot of people here, they trade gold or they trade currency pairs, or they even consider the US dollar in their analysis of indices. We've got a little bit of everybody in the audience here.
Market analysis, free trading courses, edge finder data, and special offers. What do these things all have in common? They're all available for you right now inside of our free Discord. You can click the link down in the description below to join the free Discord today and get access to all of this and more. Stay up to date with all the latest trading information and A1 content. And if you want to upgrade to our Gold VIP Discord that features every single trade that Trader Nick and our other professional analysts take, you can find the links for that in the description as well. So don't wait, go check out the free Discord today.
From the dollar's perspective, and maybe the easiest way to do this would be to talk about the dollar index at the DXY. What are your thoughts here on the dollar index? What would actually show signs from a technical perspective that the dollar index is reversing stronger? Because I do think I'm with you. I think in the short term, the path of least resistance for the dollar index still seems to be down, right? The downward trend still seems to be in control. We haven't had these huge breakouts the other direction. We're not seeing some sort of higher low, higher high sequence. We're really still seeing a lot of red on the screen, right? A lot of bearish pressure. So what tells you, and maybe so that the audience can kind of think through this themselves, which is ultimately what we're streaming this for, is for people to think about this themselves. What gets us to change perspectives on the dollar index? What would have to happen to get you to change your analysis on the dollar?
Okay, so if normally I would work from the weekly chart down and technically analyze every time frame and build a picture of the dollar index, right? That's how I trade. I just collate data basically from each time frame and make a decision based on that. Now, I wouldn't normally go as high as the monthly, but if we look at the monthly, it's looking very bleak for the dollar, right? If you can see my chart right now, we've broken this support level here, which was at the 100 level, which is no surprise, right? The 100 level is going to be a big psychological number for the dollar index.
Yep.
And I thought if that holds, the dollar has some hope. There could be some strength coming up from this level. And there was signs of it. We got a bit of a kick up at this level. We'll look at that on the lower time frames. But as you can see, it has just absolutely blown through that big psychological $100 level.
Yeah.
So, that concerns me for the dollar, right? Maybe retraces into this level and a move lower. For me to start seeing a more mid to longer term strength coming back into the dollar, I would need to see a break above this 100 level. Let's say price comes down to here, we get some price action like this. I would like to see price bounce above that 100 psychological level.
Yeah. Now,
that's the monthly. I wouldn't normally go as high as the monthly, but that does paint a pretty bleak view of the US dollar. And it's coincided ever since Trump's come to control. He's just single-handedly killed the dollar. It's like the dollar killer. Anyway, but yeah, weekly, if we just look at it from a structural point of view, it's in a downtrend. right? And here's that 100 level again. So for me to start seeing US dollar strength, I would want to see at least a structure break on the daily chart, right? Because we started seeing it here at this 100 level, and that's what I was speaking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Price come down, price was just flirting around the $100 level. Then we got this structure break, and I used the moving average 20 to help visualize that as well. So this blue line here, you can see, you know, if price is above that, right, we're looking for buys. I also need to understand structure of the market. But once price came back into here, you know, we could have expected a kick off from this $100 level.
Yeah.
But it just never happened, you know. And ever since then, we haven't had a build up in structure ever since, right? It's just been a downtrend ever since. You know, this was kind of a little bit of hope here for the dollar.
I like that that $100 psychological level that you're talking about, because it does make a lot of sense, right? And it's visible on multiple time frames. So I think that everybody, you know, listening should acknowledge or see this, whether you mark it up on your chart or just psychologically take note of this, right? You have the 100 DXY level really acting as a very longer term level, or psychological level, if you will. You can see price came really close to it, turned it around on the dime there, or not on the dime, but pretty close, right? And then it came down here, tested that area. So it clearly has been historically a pretty big area. We saw the 100 level get tested from the low side in 2020, then proceeded to drop down, took it back, found support. So it is this big psychological level. So I do think that's actually a really great way of phrasing it in terms of how do we see dollar index strength? Well, a sustained move past the 100 level. You know, you kind of see we tried to move higher here on the weekly chart, failed out, reversed, and moved lower. If we were to see from a strong dollar bullish perspective, what I think I would also need to see, I really like that analysis of the 100, would be taking out that 100 level and confidently staying above. Would be a really strong start in terms of a longer term bullish perspective on the dollar index. As long as we are not there, right? As long as we can't take back that level, the dollar index in the meantime still looks like it's got struggle, right? Still struggling to hold any sort of level of support. Although the one thing I will say about the dollar trade here is that we've seen, momentum has slowed. So I do think that, not to get too fundamental during our segment, Tom, but I do think that we would need to see some sort of fundamental catalyst come back into this market to really get things going. You mentioned, of course, the Trump tariffs, a dynamic there, causing some serious change in trade dynamics globally and threatening that dollarization globally, right? There's been a little bit of a challenge to that. How much can people trust the U.S. and if trade can be kind of ripped away from countries, maybe a little less reliance on the dollar is a popular theme right now. It certainly seems to be, but we've recently seen things kind of slow down on that department. We've seen most trade deals seem to move in the right direction to an extent. So we're seeing sort of a choppiness in the dollar index now compared to that huge momentum lower. So if you're going to get a true another leg lower, which by the way means a lot to the gold traders and to the currency traders, because obviously a weaker dollar would likely lead to stronger, gold movements, etc. If you're going to get this, the big question, the big thing I would be looking for specifically on a fundamental catalyst would likely be really soft jobs data. We talked about that at the top of the show. I just wanted to throw that in there. To me, right now, you have inflation, which looks mixed to cooling. It's not, it is cooling generally. So, inflation's heading in the right direction. But what's been holding up the dollar, I think, has been strong labor data. That's kind of what resulted in this rally here that we've recently seen, although small. I think what you're going to have to see would be slowdown in the economy, right? Slowdown in jobs would get the dollar to really tank below the 90s in my personal view. So if you're going to get that bigger push lower, those would be the fundamental catalysts that I'd be looking for. From a technical perspective, like I said, I think momentum has gone from this clear, obvious, strong downward trend to more of a slow and steady downtrend, which is still a downtrend. But I think you have the potential to kind of go in either direction from here. Fundamentally, I'm pretty mixed on the dollar, so I don't have a very strong bias one way or the other. However, that brings me to what I was talking about earlier, Tom, and I want to get your thoughts on. We've got a couple minutes here before we're going to take the show on to our next guest. But I wanted to get your thoughts on gold, because obviously with a weak dollar, we've seen gold really erupt this year. Gold has been in a massive uptrend. It's probably one of the biggest winners in terms of major assets of the year. Ethereum and Bitcoin might take the lead there, but gold has also done really well off of a weaker dollar. What are your thoughts on gold? Are you bullish? Do you have any positions? What would you look for possible trades?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you own any gold, sell it. No, I'm only joking. But, gold is just on a crazy upward trend, and it has been. But, we've seen some clues that, has it found its ceiling? And again, we're looking at the weekly chart here. You don't need me to tell you. I mean, just look at that trend, right? It has been flying. And it seems to have found a bit of a ceiling, right? It's got this level here that has proven to be very good resistance for gold, right? Now, the big question is, will it break through that, or are we going to find sellers at this level again? Now, excuse me. Now, that's what we're seeing on the weekly, but ultimately, bullish, and we still have room to move into back up to these highs. And then if we look at the day chart as well, we have had a nice, I was actually looking for a gold buy today. You have to bear in mind our time horizons are quite different, right? I'm an intraday trader. Yep. I'm looking to get in and out of gold in really this space here, pretty much, right? Mm-hmm. So I really like the setup for gold. I just didn't quite retrace into a value area for me. But, if we just track the structure of the market, right, we become an uptrend again, right? We was in a downtrend at this point, but this key level here got broke, further US dollar weakness, gold strength, and we had this nice big super bullish candle. And I love this for a setup, when you get a nice bullish candle, break through a key resistance level, and then I'm just looking for a retrace into here. So right now, bullish, but not in this trade. And I would take price back up to here. But, from a technical standpoint, I wouldn't like to push any further than this right now. I would take profit at this level. Sure. It keeps telling me that sellers are at that level, right? So I'm not going to push gold, and you were explaining you were in a gold trade, Nick, which I totally like. For me, I would take some profit off at this level, and just to sort of clarify my setup, this is what I would have been looking for today, right? We got this H4 uptrend. We had, I was just looking for a nice pullback into here. Didn't happen. Didn't get into the trade. No problem. Don't suffer with FOMO. Although looking at that candle, maybe I am. And price has just shut off. But yeah, really like this trade in here. Would I re-enter this trade? Perhaps, right? If the H4 candle stays like this and we get a move back to this level here, stops below here, I would still look to potentially get in on that gold trade. So I'm very much looking to buy gold. But like I say, pushing it past this level, again, as you said, Nick, really depends on how that dollar's going to unfold as well. And I totally agree with that dollar index downtrend. You can just absolutely see is slowing down, right? If we go to
and I think I think that momentum theme that we just got done discussing with the dollar index, right? Momentum slowing does not necessarily mean it has to reverse either, but same thing has been present on gold, right? You've had this momentum that was so obvious, so dominant in the early parts of 2025, and now we've had this sort of grindy sideways to upward trend on gold. These are two different market environments. And, you mentioned being more of an intraday trader, right? Getting in and getting out, scalping or scalping in and out. Are you more of a scalper or a day trader?
Day trader, really. Okay. Yeah. I normally enter on H4, H1.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you're looking to play that zone to zone. And so,
exactly.
Which is great if you can kind of spot those levels like you just got done discussing. You're dropping it down to the 4-hour chart. You're looking to trade that zone to zone. And then again, this is the cool thing for the audience is, there's people in the audience who are more swing traders, day traders, scalpers. We have a little bit of everybody who tunes into these shows. And so, Tom may be taking this, like, let's just say, for example, he caught this move. He's in there. He's looking to kind of take that slice, which is a nice move on gold, and then move on. And, then you have traders like myself who I bought the low end of this range in a weekly chart upward trend with the idea of putting a stop below here and holding it for weeks if I need to see if I can get a move. For me personally, I'd be looking to move past this and continue to trail stops until I get taken out. And that's the beauty of trading, is there's many different ways to make money in markets. Some are shorter term in nature. Some are, let your winners really run for an extended period of time, which has its drawbacks too. Or you can kind of get in, take your profits, move out, and do it over and over. And that's the cool thing about trading.
Nick, would you take, once it gets to that resistance level, would you take some profit off your trade or not? You just let it run?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when it comes to partial profits, for me personally, I don't take partials. However, trailing stops in a way kind of have a similar equity curve or result to taking partials. So for example, if we get this move up to this level, and let's just say, for example, we do this. If this were to take place, what I would do is I would take that stop and I'd move it up here. On the higher high, I'd trail that stop further. So I'm all in, all out with my positioning for the most part. I do sometimes add to winners, but primarily I'm just trailing a stop on a move like this, and I'm trying to play for the big one. So what that means is I may give back these gains, and that stinks when it does. But every once in a while, I'll also catch this full move with a full size position. And again, this is where it's like some people take partials, some people take it all in, all off. Some people do 3-to-1 risk rewards, 2-to-1, right? Some people scale in, scale out using dollar cost averaging. There's all sorts of different ways to approach it, which I think is the beauty of markets, is you can kind of find your niche, find your specialty, and just play it over and over. But for me specifically, I like to trail stops and be full size in, full size out. And you like to take a little bit more partials.
Yes, I would still, even though I'm trading that gap, just from there to there, as you explained, I'll take partial profits at that level, anywhere from like 70% to 90% of the trade, and then I'd let 10-20% run and then trail the stop from there, and potentially use that 80% 70% profit that I've taken to put back into the trade as well if we get a retrace.
So we just had New York open, we've got the Dow up and NASDAQ down, which is interesting. So it seems like Dow is leading the way today. But let's not focus on the short term just for now. I'm looking to sell pound dollar, one of the major currencies in the markets. Something that brought this to my attention was the Edge Finder. Then I decided to pay attention a little bit to seasonality. And anyone that watches me relatively frequently will know that my opinion on seasonality, specifically with major currencies like the pound, like the dollar, the euro, it's relatively unimportant. And that's because it doesn't take into account things like monetary policy or any of the economic or geopolitical landscape. But this is from Season AX, which is a historical or seasonal program for all markets. But anyway, if we look here, pretty much towards the end of July, and I don't have a Season AX membership anymore, so I can't see the exact date, but it looks towards sort of 23rd, 24th, 25th, etc., into pretty much the end of the year, towards November. And again, this is 45 years worth of data. It's extremely bearish. So the technical plan so far is I've got an alert set here, which is at 1.36233. Now, there's no real reason for this level. It's just it kind of looked good to me. You know, we've got a minor previous high here. We've got some lows. So I was thinking this might be a nice level to get in. Stop loss at the daily high. And this is accounting for the rest of the seasonality and also potentially some more dollar bearishness to come. So I am overall bullish. However, that's a very flimsy or a very weak bias at the moment, because obviously we need to see how the data is going to continue to come out. But we are hitting a level of support down here. I think actually I saw this, so credit to the credit to the A1 guys. I saw this in their Telegram. I don't really look at the 4 hour anymore on the dollar, but we do have this little support here. So we may come back down, start retesting the decade trend line, or even reject right here. If we do reject here, fine, I might have to market execute slightly lower, but either way, I'm looking to get into a pound dollar short, and as always, backed up by the edge finder here with a very nice score of -9, very bearish. So all of the factors at this moment are saying to short pound dollar. So we'll see how this goes. Fresh haircut, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. And Luca and Cabby. Wow, you guys are making me feel good. I've got a wedding to go to tomorrow. The wedding isn't actually tomorrow, but I've got to go to the venue tomorrow. The best man. So, you know, I've got to look fresh, but I can't outdo the groom. So, you know, it's a hard life when you just look this good sometimes. I'm joking. But yeah, this is the last time I'll be on this week. So I hope you guys will ask some questions if you do have any. What's everyone's opinion on crude? My friend, unfortunately, crude is really outside of my scope in terms of my knowledge basis. However, I can give you what I can. The edge finder is relatively bullish. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, so I'm not going to repeat it too much, but this is just my personal rule. I filter out trades. So we obviously have neutral on the edge finder, which is pretty much a score of 4 or +4 to -4, and that's just where the economics aren't really given enough to give you a bullish or bearish. However, my personal idea is I don't pay attention to 5 either. So whether that's a +5 or -5. And the reason really is just because if we have one flip in a bit of data, it's going to send that trade back into a neutral zone, and then that makes that trade invalid for me. Whereas if we're looking at something like pound dollar, which is -9, we can afford, and again, this is just on the scoreboard I'm talking about, we can afford to have something flip against the trade idea and it still be a bearish reading. So that's just my view. So oil, in terms of direction, is getting a bullish reading, but it's nothing overwhelming. It's got a score of 5, so it's just above neutral. It's tricky because I'm not really sure what's going on the oil picture right now in terms of OPEC, supply and demand, or anything like that. However, just from a technical view here, it looks like price wants to come back down into this next level of support, which is around 60.6. The reason I'm saying 60.6 is because this is also towards the bottom of this Bollinger. Now, daily time frame here, 200 Bollinger Band can be very useful to start to look. If you're wanting to be bullish, you could look to catch that bounce off this 200 and maybe something like this. So I would be looking more towards the bullish side, but again, I would take that with a grain of salt because it's not my main asset. You know, oil is kind of something that I leave on the sidelines. If there's something overwhelming, something that catches my eye, fine, I'll look at it. But on a day-to-day basis, not that interested. Swiss yen, good setup buy. Yes, actually, I'm looking to get into Swiss yen and Euro yen as well. I'm actually going to move Euro yen up here. Same with Aussie yen, pretty much all of the yen pairs. Just before I go into those, I am in New Zealand yen at the moment, which is looking a little bit shaky. I'm roughly break even on this whole position. I've got the initial position here, scaled in here, so it's break even at the moment, because obviously this one's in profit, this one's in drawdown. But we are coming into our 200 daily moving average as well as the 50 moving average here. So there are still some factors that could support this trade to go to the upside, but we did have cooler inflation for New Zealand not too long ago. But anyway, back to what you said about Swiss yen. Mixed. So the reason I'm not saying that it's too high to buy is just because I've been saying it's too high to buy pretty much for the past 1 to 2 weeks, and I've missed a large amount of this move. And it's the same thing with a lot of yen pairs, similar to euro yen, actually not Aussie yen, I don't think, but yeah, euro yen's done the same thing where it's just broken above the Bollinger and continues to push higher. So whether we're just going to have a minor pullback into the most recent low here and then continue higher, it's definitely possible. If you're a short-term trader, I'd be looking for something a bit more like this. However, because I'm more of a long-term focused trader, I'm looking for more of a swing trade. I want to see price come back into this all-time high, have a small mean reversion, let the 200 moving average catch up a bit, and then I'll be looking to be a buyer in this market. I just can't allow myself to get in, because if I enter here, where can my stop loss be? Well, according to my rules, which is my stop loss is basically, to simplify it very much, it's just below the previous low or above the previous high. And here, my stop loss really would have to be 728 pips, which is just way too much for me. So yeah, currently no go. But again, if you're an intraday trader, a scalper, I'd be looking to be a buyer around 183.391. How do you use supply and demand? Very simply, really. So I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have no idea what the difference between supply and demand and support and resistance is. I know that people call them different things. I'm not sure if there's actually a reason or if it's just different terminology for the same thing. But I've always just said it's the same thing because from what I've seen, you know, it basically is the same. However, technically, you would define a support and resistance by highs and lows, really. So this, in my view, is a resistance, but only because it's an all-time high. If this was sort of a normal market and this wasn't forming all new all-time highs, I probably would just ignore this. But the reason I'm paying attention to this is because, again, I'm looking for this break and retest to then confirm that we've turned from resistance to support. However, you know, that's, I guess, if you're new to trading, that may be a bit more complicated than what you're asking for. This is a great example of a resistance here. So you can see price formed this high and then came back up multiple times and rejected, then finally broke above. So the general rule, I guess, you could use for support and resistance is if it's touched the same level 2 times or more, then yes, we've got a support or resistance on our hands. Then in terms of actually using it, goes back to what I just said here. I'd be waiting, obviously, depending on if I'm a buyer or seller. If I'm looking to buy up this level, then I'm waiting for the break above and then the retest and then the continuation. If I'm looking to be a seller, then I'd want to see the break down, a retest back up, and then the continuation back to the downside. So yeah, that's that. Euro yen is exactly the same as Swiss. Well, pretty much the same idea, not new all-time highs, but I'm looking for a retest on the previous resistance level at 165, pretty much on the dot actually at 165. That would ideally also allow the 200 moving average to catch up a little bit, and then we could start looking to take this market a little bit higher, possibly back into all-time highs around 175. I think that could be a relatively strong idea.
Did you know we do a live trading show Monday through Friday with guests from all over the world? To get notified when we go live, click the bell button next to the subscribe button or check in at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have helpful, free content in the description below and on our website, a1trading.com. Thanks for watching today's video, and we'll see you tomorrow.